Before we jump into this podcast, let's just have a first word from our sponsors, NordVPN, the fastest VPN in the world and an absolute essential travelling companion. You can use NordVPN on 10 devices with just one account, easily switching your virtual location to access apps and websites in other countries. But if you're out of the country, make sure that you've got NordVPN to be able to use your subscriptions and watch the live sport that you might miss. If you're at home, use it to see if you can save money with products that might be cheaper in another region. Go to nordvpn.com/Manchester to get 4 extra months on the 2-year plan. The link is also in the podcast description. Hello and welcome to the Manchester is Red podcast. My name is Steven Railston. We're recording this episode on a Monday morning. If you're a golf fan, there was good news last night because Europe won away in America. I'm joined by David McDonnell. He was watching the golf as well. David, did you enjoy the golf?
Bit nervy. I mean, I don't think any of us saw that coming, that kind of finale. I think we're all anticipating it might be over by about 8:30, 9 with the lead that Europe had. But yeah, it was a lot more nervy than it needed been. But they got over the line, and that's I think if you'd given them 15-13 at the start of the week, they'd have taken it.
Well, it was almost like watching United, wasn't it? Because Amorim always says we don't make it easy for ourselves.
Yeah.
Europe really did not make it easy for themselves.
Yeah, but the difference is they won.
They got over the line and they won, especially away from home.
Yeah.
Enough about the golf chat then. We were both down at the GTEC Stadium. Early kickoff, early start for both of us, going down to London. Last week was so positive, David. We had your first podcast especially. I think it was good timing after the Chelsea game. And a really important 2-1 win in response to the Manchester derby defeat. Amorim really needed that, and it was a spirited performance. But we stressed the importance of following up that result and getting back-to-back wins for the first time. He's been unable to do that so far. After this result, inevitably the conversation has started again, whether it is time to move on, for United to cut their losses, to change the manager. We'll get stuck into that straight away and then come on to the performance and the nitty-gritty of it. We've probably got slightly different opinions, although I'll probably agree with you for a lot you're about to say, because I've saw what you've written this morning. I think I'll start by saying I'm reluctant to say that he should be sacked outright. However, I think it's starting to seem like it's definitely not going to work out. It's 1 step forward, 2 steps back. We've made that point a few times. Mm-hmm. They're unable to build momentum. They can't string together a consistent run of results. Having said that, I could see the logic in giving him a little bit more time, because he's been heavily backed in the summer transfer window. And I just think if you've come this far, what is the damage of a few more games going to cause? But I'll hand it over to you and you can give your opinion.
I see that point. I just think it was so flat, that performance on Saturday. We've been here so many times before. It's coming up to a year since Ruben Amorim took over at United, and the team have regressed. There's no clear or obvious signs of progress. Now, I don't want to be writing that Ruben Amorim deserves to be sacked, because ultimately you don't want to see managers lose their jobs. But you can only report on what you see and the evidence in front of your eyes. And what we're seeing is a team that has just not bought into his philosophy, has not bought into his way of playing, his ideas. We hear rumours that players are starting to become disaffected, with his management, with his philosophy, with his style, his system, is just the whole thing. And we're seeing that on the pitch in front of us. United, we mentioned this last week, in the hierarchy there are saying, well, look at the data. Privately they're saying, look at the data. XG is up. We've got more shots on target, shots on goal, fewer shots conceded. But the only metric, the only stat, the only data that matters is the result. And they've won, 2 Premier League games out of 6. They've got 7 points from possible 18. They're 14th in the table. There's been no progress from last season on that evidence. And this was the season we were told he'd have a full pre-season with the players. He would be able to implement his ideas. Even Ruben Amorim himself told us that, missing out on the Champions League, losing that Europa League final to Tottenham was a blessing in disguise, because it would give him more time to work with the players on systems, on patterns of play, on getting his ideas across. Well, that hasn't materialised either. So, I'm loath to write that a manager deserves to be sacked, because, I'd love nothing more than for him to turn it around and prove me wrong. But I think at some point something has to give. And I think if Manchester United hierarchy, if Sir Jim Ratcliffe, Omar Barada, Jason Wilcox, everybody else on that football leadership team, if they're not having misgivings, if they're not thinking, hang on, are we sure we've got the right man here? Then they're doing a disservice to Manchester United, and they don't have the best interests of the club at heart. Because the match-going fans I've spoken to, they don't turn on the manager in the stadium, but there was a few there that were giving out a lot of stick to Ruben and the players at the final whistle when the players went over to thank them for the support. And the guys I speak to and get messages from are saying that the time has come for a change. So as I say, time seems to be running out for him. But I think if they're not making contingency plans behind the scenes and assessing the prospect of other candidates and who might be available if they need to make a change, then they really should be doing that.
We've been told that Amorim does retain the backing of the board and that no replacements are currently being lined up. I will caveat that point with when these defeats happen, that is the standard line and the standard response. You can't really say anything else, can you?
No.
United were forced to clarify on Amorim's position after Grimsby as well. And once these inquiries start to come, it's difficult for a manager to recover. It's rare that they will turn it around. And I think that's probably the key point with Amorim now. It was such a bad season last year, 15th in the Premier League, a really bad start to this season. It would take a roaring turnaround for him to get a hold of this and become a success. Mm-hmm. When you look at the stats and the unwanted statistics that we've touched upon, it all suggests that he isn't going to be a success. And I do get the logic. I'm kind of toiling with it in my head at the moment. I still haven't probably fully come out on a decision. They just suggest that it is time for United to cut their losses and to move on. What were your thoughts watching that performance? It was bad, wasn't it? Because we talked about the aggression against Chelsea. That was absent from the first whistle. We didn't see that. Brentford made a very good start to the game. The first goal was probably a mistake from Harry Maguire and a bit to do with the system as well, I thought.
Yeah.
Because Maguire, he jumped up and tried to play the offside trap, but it didn't happen. Brentford then go 2 goals up. United had a chance to get back into the game in the second half because Sesko scored and half the deficit. But they weren't great in that second half, were they, either?
No, I mean, the only chance, we had our heads down, obviously, filing for quite a bit of the second half. But I think the penalty, obviously, which should have been a red card, we'll come on to that probably later on. The start of the
second half was drab. It was very pedestrian. I think that was concerning, wasn't it? There was no urgency amongst the United players to really get back into the game.
Yeah, and as I say, I think the performance was flat, and that was the most alarming thing for me. And Ruben had talked in the build-up to the game about momentum, about how we've got to seize this momentum. If we don't understand the importance of that, then, what's the point kind of thing? And the players didn't grasp that. There was no urgency, there was no intensity, there was no aggression, as you say, Steve. And that's the least you expect from any team, but a Manchester United team. Those are the kind of principles and standards that you expect. And I think it was just flat throughout. I thought, there were wrong decisions being made by players. I remember in the build-up to Brentford's first goal, I think Dalot ran through, and I think he might have been Mbuemo on the right, which he should have picked that pass out. But instead he played a very poor pass, which was poorly weighted and poorly delivered behind Cunha. Now, the suggestions that he was fouled, I'm not so sure. But the pass certainly didn't help him at all because it was behind him. That enabled Brentford to win back the ball and then launch the ball forward from Jordan Henderson.
It shouldn't be that simple, should it?
Yeah.
A simple long ball.
But what I'm saying is that move that led to Brentford's goal came from a poor decision from Dalot and a poor execution of a pass. If you look back at the goal, that's exactly what happened. He took the wrong option, and then when he took that option, he played the wrong pass. And Mbuemo, I'm pretty sure it was him on the right. So poor decisions from players, poor decision from Harry Maguire to try and step up and catch Thiago offside, and that didn't work. And then of course he's got 10 yards to make up on him, and he's never going to do that from a standing position. And then I think thereafter it was just mistake after mistake. Defence caught out of position, and as you say, it's partly down to the individuals, partly down to the system. But these are basic errors, and they're undermining the team. And if you're giving a team like Brentford a 2-0 head start after 20 minutes, the way they work, the intensity with which they play, and the organisation they've got, you're going to struggle to get back into it. Now, I know we should have done what United should have done with the penalty that Bruno missed, but United should be taking the game to opponents. Not kind of giving them a head start and then struggling to get back into the game and sort of scrambling to get back on level terms. So I think that's the most concerning thing for United fans, that there isn't that ability to go and take the game to opponents at the moment. It just seems to be this kind of pedestrian, approach that doesn't really sit with Manchester United at all, and the whole ethos and the whole rich kind of attacking heritage that this club is built on.
Cunha came out after the game and defended Amorim and said it's not the manager, it's down to us to get it right.
They always do that, don't they?
Yeah, well, yeah, it's the standard line.
Talk about stock answers. I mean, I think fans are getting sick of that, and players come out and they go on social media and they say, no excuses, we've got to try harder. We go again next week. Well, do it this week. don't do it.
I completely
don't keep
agree.
saying we're going to do it. Do it. And if you can't do it, then there needs to be changes. And unfortunately, as we know, ultimately it's the manager. The buck stops with the manager. The manager's the one that you're never going to sack 22 players or 25 players. It's always going to be the manager who pays the price. So if they do, as they say publicly, have faith in Ruben, believe in him, want him to continue, then they need to start showing it on the pitch.
I spoke to DeLitt as well in the mix zone. He was the only United player to actually stop. The security guard laughed at us after a few rejections, which you'd expect. I didn't expect anyone to stop after that performance. And he said, "You're getting nobody today." And I went, "Well, we'll see." And fair play to DeLitt. He's kind of took on a leadership role in that dressing room. He wasn't named in the leadership squad, the leadership group in the summer, but he has done well this season on an individual basis, I think, and he has performed well. And he said, "It's down to us," similar to Cunha. The responsibility is on us, and we need to cut out the mistakes. What is a major red flag for me is watching Amorim on the touchline and his body language. And from the first whistle, he always is so active on the touchline, giving instructions, encouraging players into positions. That is very normal for a football manager to give instructions during the game. However, Amorim micromanages the players. That is not normal for a manager to do that. And if you think back to Portman Road, his first game in charge last November, I remember watching him very closely down at that game, and he was doing a lot of that, telling his wingers to come in, push up, and telling the wing back to come inside or where his midfielders should be. 11 months on, he's still doing that. He's still micromanaging his players. That doesn't make sense to me. How is that the case? After 12 months, the players should know the roles inside out. And I remember I spoke to someone from his time in Portugal. I can't remember which club it was now. And they said they knew their roles inside out. They could close their eyes and they knew where they needed to be. I don't get that impression when I watch United. It just doesn't seem that way with the players, does it?
No, not at all. And I think, as you say, he's micromanaging them from the technical area. And it goes back to what we were talking about a few minutes ago about the whole pre-season. I mean, he wanted to come, we could touch on this before, Ruben wanted to come to Manchester United this summer just gone. He wanted to see out the last season with Sporting Lisbon and then have a full pre-season. But he's had that full pre-season now. He's had time to work with the players, and it seems that in game he's still having to do that. He's still having to tell them where to be, when to push up, when to drop off, when to squeeze in, all these kind of things. Now, as you say, you expect managers to deliver instructions from the touchline, but the players don't seem to sort of feel it in a natural way. They don't seem to be comfortable in the positioning, and you saw that with both goals. With the first two goals for Brentford as well. The players out of position, players caught in two minds, didn't know where to be, whether to push up.
They don't know whether they're coming or going sometimes. Yeah. And that simply can't be the case after a season and a half now. He's into, I know this is only his full season, but he had plenty of time to learn and get those kind of little things out of the team and stamp them out, especially this summer with whole pre-season.
Yeah. And then you have the situation where he makes all these in-game changes, in particular in defence as well, when I think he brought on Yoro, didn't he? And then you ended up with Dalot playing right wing, right side of central defence,
and then
left
wing back.
Mason Mount, left wing back, and then for Brentford's third goal, you had Mbuemo playing wing back, and of course he's not a defender at all, and he lunges in on a tackle, mistimes it, Brentford break away and score a third, so the game's gone. I mean, the game was gone anyway. Then it was the 95th minute, but all these in-game changes, for me as well, points to a lack of conviction. I mean, we talk about Ruben being so sort of steadfast in his 3-4-2-1 or 3-4-3, whichever way you want to interpret it. But in game, he's constantly changing, constantly moving players around, and players don't have time to settle, and you end up with Mount and Mbuemo as wing backs, which they patently aren't, in his desperation to kind of salvage something from the game. And I think Maynard as well. He came on, and of course, it was his heavy touch that led to the breakaway for the third goal. And whilst some fans march around and say, well, look, that's why he's not starting every week, because he's got that indiscipline about him. But I think it's very hard when you're not starting and you suddenly get thrown on. You feel the pressure to impress and to have an immediate impact. And I thought he did quite well.
Good.
Yeah, I thought he did okay.
He came on. There was a moment as soon as he got the ball. I mean, there was a huge cheer for him when he came on, which felt like the fans were making a message there to Amorim. He obviously came on alongside Yoro around 66 minutes. He kind of evaded a pocket of space, came out, kept the ball at his feet, dribbled a bit, played off a good pass. Then he broke up a Brentford attack as well. So there was a little moment there when I thought to myself, do you know what? This is why he should be playing. He can bring control. I was in the camp that Manu should be starting, because you want to control the game against Brentford. You want to have that presence in midfield, retain possession, get on the front foot. When you start Ugarte and Fernandes, obviously Fernandes is brilliant at that, but that's not his natural position. And then Ugarte, he's not good at keeping the ball. He's very wasteful. And that midfield, the midfield is a huge problem. It was last season. It was under Ten Hag. It's still not been fixed. They needed a player in midfield in the summer. It's amazing, isn't it, that we were told at the end of the transfer window that it wasn't a priority because of the words strong and versatile options we used.
But it was more of a priority than buying 2 number 10s in Mbeumo and Cunha.
But we're 6 games in and we're banging heads against the wall thinking the midfield, it's just not working. It's rubbish.
No, I know. And look, that's been the problem, as you said, Steve, for years now. Manchester United's midfield. I mean, Casemiro came in, he was nudging 30 when he came in. Had a great first season, form tailed off. He got his way back into the team, but he's not the solution. We need, and they were linked obviously Carlos Baleba at Brighton. That price proved too prohibitive. I think it was 110 million. That there's no way with PSR and all the financial considerations that United have got to take into account, like other clubs, that was going to work, particularly after they spent on Cunha and Mbeumo, and they obviously needed a forward as well, and ended up spending 74 million on Sesko. But the midfield is such an important area that it's almost like neglect to disregard that. It's almost like negligence on the part of the United hierarchy that they didn't actually address the midfield and bring in a player with the industry and the kind of the creativity and the ball winning ability. You need an all-rounder in there.
But the irony is...
And that then allows Bruno Fernandes, if he is going to persist, Ruben, if he's going to persist in playing Bruno in this deeper midfield role, it gives him a little bit more license and freedom to move forward. But he hasn't got that because Ugarte, as you say, is not reliable enough. He's not a defence... He's supposedly a holding midfielder, a defensive-minded midfielder, but he's just not convincing enough in that role.
If you play 4-2-3-1, the midfield options would suddenly look pretty decent. I mean, if you had Mbeumo and Cunha on the right and left, you've got Sesko that up front leading the line,
Bruno behind him,
Fernandes in the 10, and you've got Casemiro playing next to Manu. But Fernandes, Casemiro, and Manu gelled brilliantly together under Ten Hag. Obviously, there was issues towards the end, but that three proved they could work together. And that could be a very promising midfield with the additions, with the new signings. But he's never going to change his system. And it's starting to feel like that stubbornness is going to be his undoing now, because he's not getting results. He's refusing to change. And if that's the case, the inevitable seems to be around the corner.
Yeah, I mean, you do wonder. It's quite interesting. I think it was the press conference before the Chelsea game, where Ruben came out with that great quote where he said, I think someone asked him in the press conference, he had a meeting with Jim Ratcliffe this week. So Jim Ratcliffe, did you talk about the formation? Did he try and maybe, sort of steer you towards maybe playing a different formation?
And then sign a new contract.
He said, no, he wanted me to sign a new contract, jokingly. And then he said, not even the Pope would get me to change my philosophy and my way of playing. Now, Ruben obviously sees that as a strength, the courage of his convictions. It can also be a weakness, this inability to adapt and to change. And as you said, Steve, a 4-2-3-1, suddenly the defence are more comfortable, the fullbacks are more comfortable playing in their sort of roles that they are accustomed to, that they've grown up playing, that they play their whole professional careers playing. Centre-backs are comfortable. It just feels like a more, sort of secure shape and a shape that brings out the best in these players. But he's so stubborn that he's not going to do that. And I think that will ultimately be his undoing. Now, we know it's not just the system that's led to this poor start. It is individual errors. It's a whole number of factors. But I do think it starts with the system. I do think the players just haven't got to grips with it. They don't feel comfortable. They don't look comfortable. And we hear, as I said, murmurings about players being a bit disenchanted with it and questioning, why, if it's not working. It's the old definition of insanity, isn't it? Doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. And the players, I think, are feeling, well, if this isn't working, why can't we have a plan B? Why can't we be adaptable? Why can't the manager be flexible and change and just see if it works? And if it does work,
he's going to die. He's going to die on the hill now. He's going to die.
But it's not a weakness to actually hold your hands up.
Yeah.
But the trouble is, Ruben says, and he said this on 2 or 3 occasions recently to us, if I was a player in that dressing room and I saw the manager, i.e. me, change my approach, change my formation, I'd be thinking, hang on, what's this guy about? But I don't think that's what they think. I think they'd appreciate it and welcome it.
I've actually got respect for him for it's a weird thing to say, but it's just steadfastly, stubbornly standing behind it. I half respect it. I actually do. It's clearly not working, and it's going to be the reason that he'll lose his job.
Yeah.
But I do have respect for him for sticking by it, because he's right. He said this in the press conference where for a long time, and with Ten Hag, we complained there was no philosophy, there was no system, and it was clear that we were struggling to see what United were trying to do. They had no identity. The problem is United have an identity now, but it's not a good one, and not winning games.
No. And I think, we go back to the results as well, it's not just the defeats that are going to do for him in the end, it's the wins as well. There's only been 2 of them this season. But you look at Burnley; they should have been 3 or 4-0 up by the break. And it was.
See, I wouldn't put the Chelsea game in that category. I think.
Well, I would, because Burnley they were was it 2-0 up, and then got back to 2-2, and then they needed a 97th minute penalty, controversial penalty from Bruno Fernandes to win that game. They should have been outside by half time. Chelsea, they get the early red card with Sanchez, and that was obviously down to United's great play.
Sorry, 1-0. It was 1-0. And
1-0,
Lyle
sorry.
Foster scored. I thought that.
Yeah, it was 1-0.
Burnley went up the pitch straight away, scored to make it 2-1.
That's right. Sorry, yeah, and it was 2-2 and 3-2.
Yeah.
But with the Chelsea game, they get the red card, which has come from their great play. They've actually drawn that foul from Sanchez, so it's not a fortuitous decision. It's actually their quick thinking and Buemo's quick run has forced the keeper into that mistake. So that's a deserved red card, and they built on that advantage, and they seized upon that opportunity to build a 2-0 lead, and then Casemiro gets sent off. And suddenly, when they score with 10 minutes to go, they're clinging on. But the wins haven't been convincing. So you can't even point to those wins.
See, I'd say it wasn't objectively, because it was 2-1 in the end.
Yeah.
So it was tight. And those last 10 minutes were far too nervy. It shouldn't have been like that. But the reason why it was like that is because of stupidity from your most senior, experienced player. United should have won that game 4 or 5-0. I wouldn't put that in the unconvincing. They made it hard work for themselves against Burnley. I completely agree. And they should have been out of sight.
But what I'm saying is the results and those 2 wins have not been at a canter. They've not been.
Well, none of his wins have. That's the thing after June.
Apart from the Everton one, which was
Marcus Rashford scored twice. But even that day, Everton. I thought if they took their chances in the first half, that could have been a different game. Yeah,
but I just feel. We lauded the character and the resilience they showed, and I'm not going to pretend that isn't a quality. And they showed great character against Chelsea to hold on to that win, hold on to that lead, and see out the win. But I just think the nature of the performance doesn't fill fans with a huge amount of confidence. And we shouldn't be in this position after almost a year of Ruben Amorim talking about the team being in 14th position, the team not having confidence, the players not having confidence, the fans. Ruben talked to us in the summer in America about dreading going to games, and he says, "I don't dread them anymore. I'm excited." But if I was him, I'd be dreading going to games, because he also said on Friday as well, in the same breath, still don't know what version of my team's going to turn up, and he's proved right.
It was a funny line, that, wasn't it? Probably everyone in the room thought bloody hell. And then after that Brentford game, you look back at it and think it's not a good quote, because we saw it. He doesn't know which version of the team are going to turn up. It was not the same team that came out firing against Chelsea, but Chelsea was 5:30. The fans were up for it. Needed to win after City. It felt like the perfect storm to produce a response. Yeah. You've got to do it each week, and they cannot be consistent. And you've got to turn up, and 12:30, different game, away in London, and they couldn't do it again. Yeah. I think his body language on the touchline, it sounds like a piece the Athletic would write. I think they actually have to be fair about his body language. It was a bit concerning.
2,000 words, please.
Yeah. It wasn't good. He wasn't pleased from the first whistle. I noticed when he left the press conference, a staff member gave him a kind of comforting tap on the back as he left. He had such a comfortable life with Sporting Lisbon. He took on a big job. Yeah. It seems we're back to this position, which has happened time and time again in the last 12 years, where these highly regarded young managers or an exciting manager or someone who should be a good appointment on paper comes in and struggles, and the job eats away at their soul. It's been suggested that it's a club thing, that the club's rotten. But the club has completely changed in the last 18 months. It is a different club. Things have been done to change the culture, to change the environment. The recruitment has been slightly different. He spent £250 million in the summer.
Spent 50 million quid on upgrading the training ground as well.
It's on him to make this work. Yeah. And we talk about not having the midfielders and the personnel, but there is more than enough quality in that squad not to be in the bottom half of the Premier League table.
Yeah, and if you look at his record as well, was it 34 points from 33 games? 99, yes.
99, yeah. So 34 points from a possible 99 in the top flight.
9 wins. I think he's 9 wins from 33 games. He's lost 17 of them. So he's lost more games than he's played in the Premier League. Graham Potter got the sack at the weekend. I think the win percentages were pretty similar, about 25, 26%. So listen, he's existing on blind faith at the moment. Amorim is surviving on blind faith of Omar Barada, Sir Jim Ratcliffe and Jason Wilcox.
Can you just hold that thought for a second, David?
Of course.
Because that was the first point for the second part. So we'll have half time and we'll get the adverts in, which pay for our wages and hopefully some pints. And we'll have a little break then. We'll be back in a moment for the second part. Welcome back to the Manchester is Red podcast. So no prizes for what we're going to talk about at the start of this second half, because I completely agree, David. Omar Barada was responsible for Ruben Amorim's appointment for Sporting Lisbon. Jason Wilcox, who's now the sporting director, has had his fingertips across all aspects of the club, but heavily behind recruitment as well. We've talked a lot about Amorim there in that first part and what it means for him, the result and the pressure on him that he is facing now. It's been a really disappointing start. But because of that, the decision makers, they have to be held accountable as well. Yeah. In the past, perhaps there hasn't been those figures to look to, but United have some very present figures now who are running the football club, and they take responsibility for hiring Ruben Amorim. And I think that's part of why they're differing and they're taking the time on his future, because it will not reflect well. We made this point a few podcasts ago. It will not reflect well on Wilcox or Barada if the decision is taken to sack Amorim. Fingers will be pointed at them. Wilcox even said in a recent interview, I hope we get the chance, I pray we get the chance to turn this club around. That shows that even Wilcox is probably thinking, this needs to work. I could be on borrowed time as well.
Yeah, and rightly so. I mean, these people are paid handsome salaries, millions and millions to make these decisions. And as we said on last week's podcast, everyone knows that Ruben Amorim was Omar Barada's appointment, and that was one of the reasons why Dan Ashworth left. There were tensions and conflict over the appointment of Ruben Amorim, but Barada was insisted upon. He was the man. He went out to Lisbon to personally tell him now or never. And if they have to, terminate his contract and bring in a new manager, it reflects terribly on Omar Barada. So there is a reluctance to pull the trigger. There is an unwillingness to do this. But he's existing on blind faith at the moment, surviving rather. Ruben's surviving on the blind faith of Sir Jim Ratcliffe and Omar Barada and Jason Wilcox, because the evidential proof isn't there. The team is regressing. Now, you can look at all the data, and all the data analysis says, they're doing so much better. But really, on the pitch, where it matters, in the league, they're already out the League Cup, they're not in Europe. Everything's unraveling. Now, if there was any kind of, progress that you could point to and say, look, we are moving in the right direction, but fans aren't stupid. They don't see the progress.
There's glimmers of progress, but the results are not good enough, and it's a results business. There's moments of games when they do look good and they do look promising. Even at the start of the Manchester derby, I thought, right, they're up for this. They look really good going forward and slick, but they lost that game 3-0. It's not good enough to have moments at this stage. He needs to deliver, doesn't he? I mean, it's crunch time. He's under pressure.
Yeah, and they're closer to the bottom than they're at the top. I mean, this was the season when they were meant to be putting that aberration behind them last season as a one-off and really pushing for Europe. No one was stupid enough to think that they could ever challenge the title or probably even for the Champions League places. But just to get back to that top half of the table, and after last season's disappointment and push for a Europa League place, that was the minimum requirement. And I think we spoke to a couple of the players in America on the pre-season tour, and they said Europe has to be the minimum for us, whether that's Champions League or Europa League. They're a million miles off that at the moment, a million miles off that. Now, if you get rid of Ruben Amorim and bring in a new manager, will everything change? I don't know, and nobody knows. But at the moment, it's not working, and that's what they have to concern themselves with now. The here and now, this isn't working. And if you carry on doing this, just sort of blindly believing that it will remedy itself and everything will be fine, that's no way to run a football club, and it's certainly no way to kind of plan any kind of strategy. So I do think that the people at the top, the likes of Omar Barada and Jason Wilcox, there's huge pressure on them now, because their appointments and their kind of future at this club almost rests on Amorim succeeding. And if they have to eventually let him go, as you said, that reflects terribly on them, and there will be legitimate questions over whether they can continue in their roles, because ultimately, this has not worked. This has not worked, and it was Barada's big appointment. He told us after the start of last season that Erik ten Hag was their man, and of course that's quickly unravelled with 4 defeats in 9 games, and he was out the door. Ruben's got 3 defeats from 6, so it's a similar record. But does he survive purely on the basis that he's Omar Barada's man?
Well, I think there's an element of that at the moment. There's definitely an element of that.
That's the only thing that's keeping him there.
I think they might have been a bit more ruthless if it had been the previous regime's appointment. Having said that, Ten Hag
at any other club, by the way, at any other club of the stature of Manchester United, Ruben Amorim would have been gone by now.
It's interesting when we talked about kind of where we stand, our personal opinions on his future in the first bit, because I'm kind of, like I said, I'm reluctant to say it outright. But having said that, I concede that all the signs point towards him walking through the exit door. And then you look ahead to Sunderland, even if they do win that game on Saturday afternoon, what's that going to change? You shouldn't be making such a big decision on a game by game basis.
Yeah.
It should be on the bank of evidence. all the numbers at your disposal, all the kind of everything in front of you, what's unfolding on the football pitch. So even if he does win against Sunderland, which buys him some more time, you've got the October international break, Liverpool, Brighton. That Liverpool game looks a bit ominous. And you talked about Erik ten Hag there, obviously different circumstances because he was at the football club for 2.5 years, but it is reminiscent of the end of days with Ten Hag in the sense that it's the exact same time of year. Ten Hag survived the October international break, scraped a win against Brentford, was at Fenerbahce, and then was sacked after West Ham. Yeah. So it's coming up to the 1 year anniversary. I think it was the 27th of October. The next, we said on the other podcast, the next few weeks are hugely important. But how do they come to that decision now? What are they going to see in the next few weeks? Because surely whatever happens, even if he scrapes a few wins and survives, does that suggest he's going to be a long-term success? I'm not so sure.
No, I don't think so.
Just surviving for the sake of it, isn't it?
I find it laughable. We hear that Sir Jim Ratcliffe and in Ineos briefing that Ruben, has the backing of Sir Jim and the United board, and that they feel it's fair to judge him over the course of a full season. Well, if this carries on like this, if they keep losing games and winning the odd one here, losing, and they're sort of mid to sort of bottom half of the table, are they really going to persist with him for the whole season on the basis of that? I don't think so. And I don't think the fans would accept that either. If this is a team with the investment, with the turnover this club makes, with the revenue and the history and the stature and the fact you've got 75,000 people coming through the turnstiles every other Saturday, this is a club that should be nowhere near the bottom of the table.
They need Europe. I mean, for the sake of the football club, but also for footballing reasons, but for financial reasons first and foremost as well. But
time is not a commodity that managers have in football these days. It's gone are the days when Sir Alex Ferguson went 4 years without winning a trophy when he first took over and was on the brink in 1990, then won the FA Cup, and of course that kind of was the catalyst for all the unprecedented success that followed. Managers these days don't have that luxury. They don't have time on their side. The game has changed dramatically over the last sort of 10, 15 years. You don't get the time to do that. So Ruben has to start winning games. So that's why I find it laughable when we get told that he's got the season, that there's no plan to change.
Well, they've not said he's got the season, but they've said he retains the backing of
But one of the briefings was that
this is his new season.
We want to judge him over the course of a full season. Well, he won't get that. He won't get that. If this does not get turned around within the next couple of weeks, certainly at Sunderland on Saturday, against Sunderland on Saturday, if he cannot win that game, I think there could seriously be a change in the international break.
But as I've said, even if he does win that game, I mean, okay, Sunderland are doing well in the Premier League this season and they're in the top half. They've had a very good start, but what does that necessarily do? I feel it just delays the inevitable. That's kind of where I'm at with it at the moment, unfortunately. Having said that, we're 6 games into the Premier League. It's been a rubbish start, we know that, and we've just got into it, but it's still very early, isn't it? They're out of the Carabao Cup. That was a disaster. They lost to Grimsby, which also you have to factor in, so there's been 7 games. But not that much football has been played.
But you can't,
and it's a big decision after they've invested a lot in this manager, not just personnel but in money, but in his system. They've looked at that system for, right, this is us now.
But that's what's keeping him in the job. That's the only thing. It's their pride. It's the pride of Sir Jim Ratcliffe and the pride of Omar Barada and the pride of Jason Wilcox. That's the only thing keeping Ruben Amorim in a job at the moment. Because any other club of that stature, he'd be out the door. And it's only the fact that they are desperate for this to work because they've invested so much reputational, stock and financial.
We sit here and criticise it, and I think that's completely fair, and they need to be scrutinised. But on the other side, it's understandable, isn't it? From their perspective, if we put ourselves in their shoes, I'm trying to get into their minds and think what they're thinking with Amorim, and I understand it. I might not agree with it, but I understand it.
I understand it, but equally, you can't ignore what's happening on the pitch. And the fans, we go back to what we started talking about at the outset here, the fans aren't stupid. They can see there's no progress. And the only reason they're keeping him in a job at the moment is because they've invested so much time and money in him. That's the only thing. If they hadn't done that, as you said, if it was an appointment by a different regime, he would have certainly would have gone by now. So he has to start repaying on that. And Amorim knows that. But at what point do you let this go on until? Sunderland, Liverpool, Brighton.
There has to be a line in the sand at some point, doesn't it?
If there is no discernible upturn in results and form, why are they prolonging the inevitable? Why are they delaying the inevitable in the sense of, well, it's clearly not working. We have to make a change because this situation has not been allowed to go on. So I don't like writing the manager. I don't think he deserves to be
sacked. Nobody does. But I think sometimes it has to be done. And that's part of the job.
I think it's probably the right decision when you look at the evidence on the pitch. The team is not getting better. Now,
I'm not putting an angel on my head and putting devil horns on you, David. We're just having a chat here. And like I say, I'm in the camp where I don't think it's going to work, but I'm kind of reluctant at this stage to outright say it, if you understand what I'm trying to say.
And from a journalistic point of view, Ruben is brilliant with us. You know, he's refreshingly candid, he's honest, he's quotable. So from our point of view, from a purely professional work standpoint,
well, yeah, from a selfish point, it'd be great.
But those aren't the things that matter.
Maybe not actually, because the access is way better when they do perform well and there's better views and whatnot. But
I think he's refreshingly honest about everything, you know, which you don't always get with managers. From a journalistic point of view, he's really says it how it is. He doesn't shirk a question. You know, he doesn't give you sort of bland platitudes. He's really, really good copy, if you like, for want of a better phrase. But that's not a reason to keep him in a job because he's good to us. No. You know, you have to keep him in a job because he's the right man for the job and because you can see the progress on the pitch. And I don't think that progress is there to see.
It'll be really interesting to see the reaction on Saturday afternoon at Old Trafford. He'll turn the Reds around. The Bonnie Tyler song, those words were written across a banner, I noticed. That was recently unfurled at the Stretford end. There's been strong support from still on match days. Some fans stayed behind after the game at the G-Tech to clap them. I saw some fans on Twitter saying, why were they doing that? But I mean, I'd probably agree, but I'd argue if you're spending your hard-earned cash and travelling down to the stadium, you can do what you want and react to performances how you want. Got a lot of respect for fans going down to that game, especially when it's an early kickoff. When you look at the alternatives, the possible alternatives, the bookmakers obviously come out all the time and send emails to journalists with the candidates. Again, it's very uninspiring. We had this situation last year. Amorim was picked out. Oliver Glasner is the current favourite at 7-2 at Crystal Palace. Then you've got the likes of Gareth Southgate, Mauricio Pochettino, Zidane, Solskjaer, Emery, Xavi, Nagelsmann, Silva, Iriola at Bournemouth and Kieran McKenna at Ipswich. There's no one, and I said this last year when we were discussing sacking Ten Hag, there's no one on that list that's jumping out at me. I don't know what you think about the situation. And that kind of comes into it as well. Although I can't contradict myself because when Erik Ten Hag was struggling at the end of his days, I said, you have to sack the manager because of the results and the evidence. You don't then look at the alternatives and delay. If he's performing badly, you sack him on that. You don't look ahead and base it purely on who's available. You make that decision afterwards, surely, don't you?
Yeah.
But it's not a great list.
No, it isn't. And I mean, Glasner is the favourite, I think, on that list.
He wouldn't leave. How would he leave Crystal Palace?
Well, he's got a year left on his contract, hasn't he? And he's not signed a new contract. And there was an issue, wasn't there, whether if they were going to sign Mark Gay. Sell Mark Gay. That there was
he's on his way out.
He would go. Yeah. Now the thing with Glasner is he played 3 at the back as well. So you know
it's a completely different 3 at the back, isn't it? Without getting
technical,
without getting Amorim's body language,
without getting all athletic.
We give them to shout outs on our podcast. But the
free advertising.
I'm reluctant to use this word. The principles and the way they play and the way they operate is different.
Yeah, it is. And a lot of the fans I spoke to, and you see on social media as well, saying, get Glasner in, you know, he's done a brilliant job at Palace, you know, won the FA Cup, and Ten Hag won the FA Cup with United, don't forget. But he's obviously one of the standout candidates. Pochettino's on there as well. I mean, he's been heavily linked with the job before Ten Hag got it. But he's an American, I think, speaking to people over there.
He's done a bad job there.
Yeah, but he wants to see America, the US into that World Cup next summer. So I think he's probably to be discounted. Ariola's done a great job at Bournemouth. Marco Silva, another decent manager.
Ruben Amorim at Sporting Lisbon ended there. I can't remember how many years it was, but ended there. Wait for a Portuguese title was fantastic in Europe. The beat City was at 3 or 4-1 just before he arrived. He had one of the biggest reputations of a young coach in Europe. It's funny, isn't it? We look at that list and weigh up the pros and cons, but we did this with Amorim and he had a fantastic CV, and all of a sudden 11 months later we're discussing why you should probably go.
Yeah, but that goes back to what we were saying about it's a results business. You know, there's never a guarantee with a manager. There's never a guarantee that if you've had success in, say, Portugal, you know, with Sporting, that it's going to translate to the Premier League. And I think you look at Manchester United this summer, the players they bought, apart from Sesko and obviously Lammers latterly in the window, but they were Premier League ready, weren't they, in Cunha and Mbuemo. And I wonder whether the next step, if and when Ruben does go, will be to get a manager with Premier League experience.
It would fit into that ethos, wouldn't it?
Yeah, because you know what you're getting then. You're not taking such a huge risk, such a huge gamble. Because there are, as I say, no guarantees. And we've seen that now. You know, this record of 34 points from 99 is just relegation form, isn't it? I mean, it's lamentable. It's indefensible. It is just terrible. I mean,
it's not good enough.
It's not good enough. And this is where I kind of struggle with people to say, yeah, but we can see little bits of progress, everything. Well, those are the stats. There's the evidence. All you need is there. And all the evidence points to him taking this team backwards. So, and the end game there is Ruben Amorim, pays with his job. Now, the next guy, I mean, you can almost pose a question: Is Manchester United the problem? Because great managers like Jose Mourinho and Louis van Gaal have come here and not succeeded and not won the title.
I think that's a lot of rubbish.
The common theme here is Manchester United and the whole culture of the club.
I think
the way the club has been structured. And we know that when Sir Alex Ferguson was in charge for almost 2.5 decades, everything at the club was built to his whim. Everything bent to his demands. And once that goes, everything almost falls down. So it was always going to take time for this club to rebuild after such a dominant figure as him, who basically controlled every aspect of the club. Everything was, as I say, built to his personality, his whim, the way he worked, the way he wanted it. And I think they're still recovering from that. I mean, Liverpool went 30 years without winning the title. So, I'm not suggesting that'll happen at Manchester United, but it's been 12 years.
Cool, yeah.
And I think the problem may be the club and the way the club is structured and the way the club is run, rather than the managers themselves.
So everything is different now. They've got a structure. They've got a new sporting director. They've got a new CEO. They've had new investment. Sir Jim Ratcliffe runs football operations. It's not the same football club as it was in the initial post Sir Alex Ferguson years. Yeah. So I think now we can't really say that. We could before Ratcliffe had came in, because the Glazers were still running the show. We still saw the problems. Ed Woodward's recruitment was absolutely rubbish.
Very haphazard,
Bristol University graduates running around the boardroom and doing what they wanted. It was not run well. You can point fingers and look at the way Ineos have run the football club, and you could argue it's not particularly being run well since that Ratcliffe's come in. But they do have a structure now, so I don't think we can use that personally.
Yeah, but the structure is still new, so it will take time for it to work effectively and smoothly. But I just feel that, possibly the pressure of managing at Manchester United. Obviously the pressure wasn't an issue for Jose Mourinho. It wasn't an issue for Louis van Gaal. But perhaps for this manager, the pressure, the expectation. Obviously, a manager at a big club in Portugal, but this is on a whole new level. Listen, it's not just one. That's one element of the whole situation, the whole scenario.
If Bruno Fernandes puts his penalty away, and it's a red card, which it should have been on Nathan Collins, it's a completely different podcast. And I know results decide and dictate the narrative, and they lost 3-1. They did not win the game. Yeah. But it's fine margins. And I do kind of have some sympathy in that sense, because Fernandes, you've got confidence when he steps up to take a penalty. Rocketed over the bar, Craven Cottage, and I really thought it surely couldn't happen again. I just thought he was nailed on to bury that, and I had the tweet ready to go and everything.
He wasn't helped by the time delay, was he? The 4.5 minutes.
I just think if you're a professional footballer, look, it probably comes into it a bit.
Yeah.
I'm not stepping up and taking a penalty in front of 17,000 people at the GTEC. But you should be burying that regardless if you're a player of his quality. Yeah. It was a really bad penalty. He's let down his manager. He's let down his teammates. I think he's had a poor start to the season. I don't think the position is helping him. I think he's really struggling in that role. I think he needs to be relocated. And I think, but again, the personnel, do you have the midfield to kind of balance it out? If you're going to move Fernandes further forward, is that Casemiro and Manu? There's problems all over the pitch. But I think Fernandes did let the team down. And I think he'd be the first to admit that.
Yeah, and the trouble is,
you can't pin it on one player.
But he's carried that team for the last few years, single-handedly. With his goals, with his work rate, with his assists, with everything, leadership. I know it gets a bad press from rival fans and pundits.
I should stress, I'm not pinning that performance on Fernandes. They were collectively rubbish, but that was a big moment.
But I think potentially we underestimate the impact the toll that's taken on Bruno in terms of being the talisman for so long and others not stepping up to kind of help him and ease that pressure on him and ease that burden on him. There's only so often he can do it and drag them out of a hole. And he's done it so many times over the last 3 or 4 years. Since he joined in 2020, but in the recent years, he's been the main man. So I do wonder mentally and physically whether that takes its toll. I'm sure it does on him. So, and also, as you say, Steve, the position is not bringing out the best in him. He's not used to playing in that deeper role. It doesn't suit him. He doesn't play to his strengths. So with all these factors combined, you're not getting the best out of Bruno Fernandes. He's got 1 goal from open play, hasn't he, in six Premier League games? I mean, that's not Bruno Fernandes' stats. He should be scoring more goals. I
presume you were of the opinion, like me in the summer, that he should have been kept.
Yes.
I was adamant because He is an unbelievable footballer. He's world class. He's been the best signing of the post Ferguson era, time and time again.
I struggle with.
He is for me world class. He won the Sir Matt Busby Award again for a fourth time.
I think he's world class. I wasn't going to disagree with that.
Sorry,
I think where I struggle with is, in any normal rational football club would have sold a player who's just turned 31 if they were offered 100 million for him at that age. But Manchester United couldn't afford to sell him because the quality of player is lacking so much in that squad. If you take Bruno Fernandes out of that squad, who else?
In hindsight now,
what are the leaders are? Where are the leaders in that squad? Who else is going to send?
Yeah, and
he's almost like Brian Robson in that respect. Who's going to take a game by the scruff of the neck and say, right, come on, like Wayne Rooney used to do, or Roy Keane used to do.
So much, but and like I'm going to contradict myself, because in the summer I said he should have been kept, but now all of a sudden six games into the season, you're looking at it and you're thinking he should have been sold, because if they'd got 100 million from, they then could have reinvested that into the midfield. The midfield could have been better balanced.
Yeah.
And then you would have had Mbeumo and Kuna starting in number 10 roles anyways. It would have been difficult because on the optics of it, initially wouldn't have looked good, but it would have had potentially a better payoff during the season.
I agree with you. And I think that's why they didn't do it. I think there was a fear. I think there was a fear amongst the United hierarchy that if we sell our best player, what are the optics on that?
It's difficult, isn't it?
What would that look like to the fans?
You don't sell your best player, do you? It is a really difficult decision. And again, I have sympathy for them. It's a really difficult one. And we were of the opinion in the summer, we said he should have been kept.
Yeah, no, absolutely. But I think there was a fear amongst the hierarchy that, you know, that from a purely business point of view, it's a no-brainer. £100 million for a guy who's about to turn 31. Why would you not do it? Particularly, as we mentioned earlier, with the, you know, you're operating against the backdrop of, you know, PSR or the financial regulations you have to adhere to. It would have made perfect sense to sell Bruno Fernandes and then spend a large chunk of that money on a younger, more energetic midfielder who can have some longevity at Manchester United. But I think there was a fear there that how will this look, how will this play out with the fans, and you know, what if the replacement we signed doesn't work? You know, there are no leaders in that squad apart from Bruno Fernandes. Can you name me one leader in that squad? Someone that will step up and take control of the game and rally the team? I can't think of one.
There is leaders. I think there's a handful of leaders, but in terms of people who can really deliver in big moments, that's a different kind of leader, isn't it? He has that quality. And he's proved it time and time again.
But I don't think there are any real inspirational leaders in this current Manchester United team.
I'd say Harry Maguire, I think for what he's overcome, he has to be considered. But
he's not inspirational.
He has to be.
I mean, he's a great defender, Harry, and I've praised him this season. I think he had a bad game on Saturday. He'd be the first to admit that.
It's an inspiration to a lot of people, I'd say, especially the younger players, showing the mental strength to overcome the adversity and the pressure, and he was just a pantomime figure for so long.
I wouldn't disagree with that. And I've written this about him, and I think he's shown incredible mental resilience and resolve and fortitude to come back from, you know, what no player should be put through. That's not in doubt. I'm talking about players who can change a game.
Yeah, so it's a different kind of leader, isn't it?
I get what you're saying. Different kind of leader. And if you take Bruno Fernandes out of this Manchester United team, there is nobody. Now, maybe in time Cunha, maybe in time Mbeumo, you know, Sesko's obviously finding his feet, but he's more of, you know, he's a centre forward, a goal scorer. But there's no one that can actually, like, as I say, like Robson used to do, like Keane used to do, like Rooney used to do, Ronaldo used to do it. Players, when things aren't going right, they will roll up their sleeves and they will deliver, and they will drag the team out of a hole, whether that's through a brilliant piece of play, a goal, a skill, or a tackle, anything like that. I mean, you're right, Maguire against Chelsea, you know, did that amazing sort of slide challenge on João Pedro, and that got as big a cheer almost as the both goals. Yeah. So he is capable of these moments, but you're not relying on someone like him to kind of drag the team, you know, out of a hole, whereas you are with Bruno Fernandes every single week. And I wonder whether that was a key factor in them saying, we cannot afford to let this guy go, because if we do, there's a massive vacuum in terms of leadership and inspiration, and, you know, there's no one to fill that void.
I've definitely changed my opinion on that after the evidence of the season, and contrary to what some people might think, it's okay to change your opinion, isn't it, in 2025?
Yeah, of course it is, yeah.
When new evidence is presented with itself, you don't see that much.
It's a strength, Steve. Admitting you're wrong, it's a strength.
Thanks very much for your time.
Tell my wife that.
Well, we'll do a special on that. Should be next podcast. The conversations with the wife. I think that can make an entertaining episode. Thanks for your time, David.
Cheers, Steve. Thank you.
Thanks to listeners as usual. We'll be back later in the week to look ahead to the Sunderland game before the October international break. Take care.